The text in the context doesn't allow that. It's talking about nations that have gone in and scattered the Jewish people out of Jerusalem. That's how we interpret this. So when we get to these passages at the end where it talks about the Messiah putting his feet on Mount of Olives and the mountain splitting in two over in chapter 14, we have to take that in the plain meaning of the language and not use it in some fantastic interpretive way that bends and shapes the text to mean something very different than what it just says.
Let me also add that the horns being used symbolically of nations, it's not just here. You mentioned that it's also used over in Daniel and other parts of Scripture. I also like to point out that you have God speaking, Yahweh speaking through the prophets to the people in roughly around the 500 BC era. How do you have someone describing to people of that era something that's going to take place at least 25 centuries later in time? Nations, their names change, technology changes, increases, weapons of war change. The symbology of horns, as in the example that we're using, meaning nations, is a generic way to describe the nations that are being impacted in that particular text that we're reading in any part of Scripture. So symbology is not bad, but we need to understand when it is used and interpret it properly as it's associated with the different things and activities that are going on.
When we look to the question of how to interpret this, I think we could explain this just a little further. To give some context for some of our readers, there's different approaches to end times and different approaches to the church age, past and present and future. Well, one of the ways of looking at the Scriptures is called premillennial. Premillennial just means that there's going to be a literal millennium coming in the future, and we're before that. So premillennial. Another one is amillennial. Means without. So without a literal physical millennium. The premillennialist tends to focus a lot on future things and future millennium. The amillennialist tends to focus a lot on today. And they look at passages and they say, well, this is symbolic of the current Christian life in the church through Jesus Christ. There's also a preterist view that tends to focus on the past, saying that many of the things in the Scriptures happened to the Jewish nation in the first century, and they interpret vast sections of the Scripture, both New and Old Testament, as having been completed in the first century, in the past. There's also postmillennialists that look forward to many of these things being culminated when Christ returns. So we said at the beginning, we had done a lot of homework, as much homework as we had done on any of the books, trying to get ready for this. And I really did. I spent a fair amount of time saying, okay, if I look at these views, which one is best of interpreting the sections? And my friends, there's just too many things that lead us towards the premillennial view.